Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. A plumber and his germophobic son are forced to get their hands dirty to save the residents of an apartment building when a genetically engineered, bloodthirsty creature escapes into the plumbing system. Yes, folks, this is our raw reaction review for Scared Shitless. Once again, I want to start this review off by thanking the folks over at FRIGHTFEST for sending us this screener and letting us be a part of course, all of the festivities going over there across the pond right now. We are very honored to be taking, at least a little bit of a dive into some of what the festival has to offer. I know a lot of crazy stuff's going on over there in the actual festival, like it always is, but we are always ready to attend virtually, because we get to talk about films like Scared Shitless, which, we tried to get at Fantasia, but it just wasn't available for us yet. But, hey, one festival later, door opens and we got to check it out. This one, man, I was so hooked on this the moment I saw that poster and read that description. This was one that I remember. Did I text it to you, or did I just tell you over the phone or
I think
whatever?
you just told me about it.
Yeah, and you were just like, yes, like that sounds great. Let's do it. It's a monster splatterfest creature climbing through an apartment building. It's hitting a lot of positive points for both Luke and I. And I mean, again, I'll show this poster real quick. Just that image that you see there, with just kind of like, it almost looks like it's stop motion or like kind of claymation style there on the cover. Like, I know they say don't judge a book by its cover, but that is an intriguing poster nonetheless. Definitely gets your brain thinking. And we got to check this one out. Luke, how are you feeling after watching Scared Shitless?
Well, going into this one, we just covered Hostile Dimensions on the channel. One of my critiques was, the poster got me all revved up and excited for what the presentation was going to be. And I got to be honest, that film left me a little underwhelmed from what they did give us. So going into Scared Shitless, that poster is amazing. It sets you up for like, is there going to be a payoff here? And then, walking into this one, I was a little hesitant because I didn't really know what it was going to present. But I got to say, from a monster perspective, from that creature aspect of this, it absolutely delivers. The creature here is so well done. They use it sparingly, I would say, throughout the film. It's not like the main focal point. The relationship really is this father and son, which I got to say that dynamic absolutely does work. And, when we're going into these apartment buildings, there's been so much well done horror in apartment buildings with Evil Dead Rise. We just saw Sting a little while ago, in both those films that, they work from that apartment setting aspect of it. So I was curious to see what they're going to bring. I got to say, overall, this one does lean a little heavier into the comedy side of things, but from a performance perspective, I think that the delivery here and the way that they kind of sell the comedy, it does work, and they also bring that horror element into here as well.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of positives to say and a couple critiques. I think that there's a few things towards the end of this that we'll talk about, but to kind of get things kicked off with just some of the best stuff, Stephen Ogg. Now, this man, we just talked about him in Dark Match last month. What a film. I cannot wait. Again, I know this is a mini review for Dark Match. Can't wait for you guys to see that. If you're a wrestling fan, if you're a horror fan, that's a winner. And, I'm just so happy to see Stephen Ogg's charm translate again in this film. Playing a very different character, but still carrying that charisma. He's playing a dad in this one to an older son who is played by Daniel Doheny. And, I think that those two have a really great chemistry together. I bought them as a father and son. They kind of have this whole germaphobe angle to the son that's going on that they talk about in the description. And, I didn't know if that was going to be like, when walking into it, if that was going to be kind of like that traditional, like, stereotypical, oh, like he's disappointed in his son or whatever. And it's a constant thing for them. But it's like, it is a constant thing, but he is such a supportive and like uplifting character to his son that it was such a nice breezy change of pace for me. Like, I just loved the dynamic between those two, and them being plumbers and, trying to kind of get his son into the family business per se. I just thought, like, overall they were the highlight of this film for me. And that's a lot when we're talking about a creature feature.
Yes, and they bring a more, I guess, natural dynamic to that father and son relationship. Like you said, they kind of could have, went the route of the stereotypical dad is, not happy with his son and, go that route with it. But here I really felt like it was a genuine relationship. I love the idea of the son being a germaphobe and the dad being a plumber and him kind of taking him along to learn the family trade in a certain aspect. And then we do get some deeper layers. We don't touch on them too deep, but they're there with, the mother aspect of everything, and why exactly the son is a germaphobe. And I love those elements to it because sometimes you can just gloss over some motivations for characters. But here you can kind of tell, I really believe that, the writer of this thing really had those character backstories to everything where you can really feel that they are those natural characters. There is more of a backstory to them, even though we don't dive too deep into the actual film because, we're dealing with more of a creature feature in the issue at hand. This one is a based off a short film. Unfortunately, I was unable to watch that. I could not find it online anywhere.
Couldn't find it either. Yeah.
I would like to see, in terms of being able to expand the story because, looking at Scared Shitless, I will say it does feel like a smaller story that has, been extended into a longer story. There are elements here where this is a father and son relationship. There are a lot of elements of them just kind of sitting there talking, and then we kind of throw in some creature effects as well. So kind of expect that going into this. It doesn't necessarily, the runtime here is small, is way shorter, so it doesn't really feel like we're sitting in these scenes too long. I just did notice that we're kind of sitting in them where it's just people talking. But the comedy deliveries, and then when we mix that with the creature, it does work in that aspect of it. So I did love the dynamic here. Stephen Ogg, like you mentioned, Dark Match already. I had completely forgotten that I had seen him in Walking Dead and when we had done the review for Dark Match. But I got to say, if he dives deeper into the realm of horror, my gosh, I'm excited to see what he does next.
Absolutely. And I will say, just with these two films alone, it's just kind of him really starting to hopefully establish himself as kind of this, mainstay in these kind of off the beaten path horror films. I know he was in I think one of the VHS films, if it was 99, I believe. I forgot to mention that one as well. He has a small part in that, but I just thought that he was fantastic. He's another great highlight here. And when we're talking about creature features, I gotta say I like the creature in this. I think that it's definitely interesting. I kind of dig the design of it. I appreciate that this thing, I want to say through and through, is entirely practical. I don't think there's a single element other than maybe some stuff that happens to it later on that you could say is digital. But for the most part, I think everything they do with it is practical, and it looks great for what it is. It's got kind of this campy, mid 80s tone to it, where it seems like it's kind of, you can tell it's an effect, but it's one of those things where it just still has that kind of creature dynamic. It feels like it is a living thing at times. And I love what they do with it. I think that this opens up the door for a lot of really gory kills. It's never anything that's going to like absolutely disturb you or anything like that. We're not talking about When Evil Lurks here. We're talking about more Terrifier light-esque, where they kind of have some fun with the gore. But I think that overall the creature was super interesting. I do have to say though, from a conceptual standpoint of where they have the creature, where it's coming from, it felt very, very paper thin. It didn't feel like it was as interesting of a critter, and we don't really get that much into what this thing can do other than attack people to really kind of, I guess, satiate it as something that I'm excited to see more of. It just kind of seems like at times it's just an obstacle. And I feel like if they really would have taken the time to kind of build up the tension, build up the presence of the creature, because we see it really early on, I think if they would have hid that a little longer and had that Jaws effect going, I think it could have had a much bigger impact.
Yeah, we don't dive too deep into the roots of, this actual creature. This was done by Stephen Kostansky, I believe,
Hmm.
who had done Psycho Gorman. If people are probably familiar with that one, but from an effects perspective, this being practical, I really did enjoy it. There's no jarring CGI that kind of distracts you, taking away from the scenes. But in the terms of that presentation, this really does feel more of like a comedy horror film rather than deep rooted into those horror elements. Because when we do see the creature itself, it's more of a, I don't want to say comedic style, but there isn't that horror tension that they do bring to this. It's more focused on what the characters are doing, and a lot of times they are presented in more of a comedic manner. So by the time that that element of the creature is introduced, we don't really have that tension. It's more of like a funny, oh, got him type of deal. They do bring the gore here, but there's no elements of you feeling scared, or could the creature be behind this door or around the corner. That's really not how this thing's presented. But from a creature perspective, this thing's rather well done. I would love to see this kind of get deeper roots if they ever did a sequel or anything like that, to really lean more so into the horror element into here, because the creature's really well done. It could be presented, that could be the actual focal point if they wanted to strip away all the comedy elements and really make this a full-on horror creature feature. The actual creature itself holds enough weight that I would believe it, and I'd buy that face value. This really does have those those 80s horror elements roots to it, where you can kind of go back and watch this one. It's not going to age terribly because we don't have CGI in here. So for me, for the presentation, it was more of a comedic manner, but I gotta say, the creature effects are really well done in this.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think that even though I'm a little bit more accepting of horror comedies out of the pair of us, I'd have to agree with you on this one, that this one does have a little bit of, I don't want to even use the term identity crisis because I use that for really bad movies, but this movie does have a bit of, I think, kind of trying to play both sides of that coin. And I think falling a little bit harder into the comedy side, which is not bad. But I think that there are times when they're trying to build some tension. They're trying to make it a little bit more scary than tongue in cheek in some scenes. And it's just one of those where it'll never really cross that boundary, because we're talking about a worm creature that is biting people by their, lower nether regions. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's like you kind of have to pick and choose the lane. And I think if they go with like a Tremors 2 approach with this going into a sequel, where they really just let the wheels off and they start expanding what this thing can do and everything, I think that that would be a much cooler way to go about it if they ever wanted to find a way to do a sequel. So, I was super duper interested in the monster, but I just think it has some tonal issues that kind of left me a little in and out. But overall, I still want to give Scared Shitless a recommendation, especially for creature feature fans and fans of horror comedy alike. If you like things like Onyx, The Fortuitous, if you like things like Dark Match, this does have a lot of similarities as far as just the presentation of comedy in a lot of those. So I would definitely recommend checking this out if you're interested in those.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a recommend for me as well. This kind of gave me some Destroy All Neighbors vibes as well.
Yes, that's what I
Just
was
kind of
looking for. Mhm.
just with some of the effects, the melding of the comedy, with just a sprinkle of horror in there that does work when it is presented. I think performance-wise, Stephen Oak, my gosh, we already we talked about him enough, but the performance is great. He sells the comedy aspect of this thing. And when they bring the gore, they absolutely bring it. So for me, this is an easy recommend. This is something you can toss on, just to pass some time. It's a breeze to get through, and I guarantee there'll be some elements in here that you'll be talking about, and some moments that you'll be quoting, just because this is a fun thrill ride.
Absolutely. I agree with that sentiment there, Luke. And yes, you guys can hopefully check this thing out later this year, if not early 2025. It does not have an official release date as of yet. It's currently doing the festival circuit. Who knows, depending on if it pops up at maybe one of the later festivals in the year, maybe we'll give it another go and at least give it a watch through again. But yeah, I'll definitely be picking it up when it comes out eventually. Just to appreciate the attempt at going for practical creatures, and overall, this is one that you could just throw on and enjoy it. This is definitely one I could see myself just throwing on in the background and kind of coming back to here and there. It's a breeze to get through. And yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. But other than that, got a lot of great stuff up on the channel right now. Luke just had a really great video, speaking of creatures, going over some underrated movie monsters. So yeah, and of course we're talking creature designs, all kinds of stuff in that, but it's a great video. Highly recommend you check that one out. And yeah, we have a lot more on the way from not only Fright Fest, but a few more things coming up at the end of the month here before we get into September. So keep your eyes out there. And until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, slash ass. 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 Splattercast, slash ass.